Hello, welcome to my channel. This is Jeremy Crow, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about moon magic, the esoteric meaning of the lunar phases. So, one of the things that I like to do on this channel is start things off with a divination. Now, yesterday I pulled a card from the Crowley-Harris Thoth deck, and what I think I'm going to do tonight is a bibliomancy using the Tao Te Ching. So I'm going to flip through this until I land on a random chapter, and then I will just read that chapter. So, and hopefully you can find some inspiration, or maybe you find it pertinent to what's going on in your life right now, whether you're watching this live or if you've come across this video after the fact and are watching the archive video. So let's see what we get tonight. All right, so tonight we landed on chapter 59 of the Tao Te Ching. When ruling the world and serving heaven, the sage uses simplicity in everything he does. Simplicity comes from letting go of what you want. If you've been true to yourself earlier in your life, then Te builds up in you like a well that never fails. Nothing is impossible then, and nothing can stop you. And if you have no limits, then you can hold the state. If the sage can find the mother of a nation, then he will govern for a long, long time. All this comes from the rootedness in the Tao of ages, the mountain of vision and of wings. So when they mention earlier, they mention if you've been true to yourself earlier in your life, then Te builds up in you like a well that never fails. Te is the Te from Tao Te Ching. And that Te is roughly translated into virtue. Now that can mean power in a sense, or it can mean a moral quality, something along those lines. It can mean the virtues of a like a crystal, for example. People talk about that in terms of what that crystal is capable of doing. Or it can mean virtue in the sense of the way that you act in the world, something along those lines. So if you weren't aware of what that meant when it came up in the chapter, that's what that means. So did anybody find that particularly interesting or relevant to their life? I see Beyond Zebra said, "Howdy, Jeremy. Looking forward to this topic." Oh, great. Yeah, howdy, Beyond Zebra. Glad you could make it. I do have a goal tonight. If we do get a super chat, that just one super chat that is of, I believe it's $20 or more, orange level, then I will reveal the figurine I utilize on my personal altar that represents Lilith. So I'll reveal that in the live stream tonight if we reach that goal. All right, so tonight's topic, the occult meaning of the lunar phases. So the lunar phases, every lunar cycle is roughly about 29 days on average. Sometimes it's a little, depending on when it begins and when it ends, but roughly around 29 days. The darkest point of that cycle is the new moon, and then we have about roughly about 2 weeks of waxing, and that means that it's growing from the new moon, which is basically when you can't see the moon in the sky. It becomes a crescent, and then it gets to half, which at that point, that's the end of the first quarter. Then it continues growing until it's full, and you know what a full moon is, when the full face of the moon is visible. And that phase from half to full is called the second quarter. And then from the next roughly 2 weeks, the second half of that cycle is the the waning moon. So the first 2 weeks from the new moon until the full moon is called waxing. The second roughly 2 weeks of that cycle is waning. And waning basically means that the shadow of the earth continues to cover the moon until the point where we can't see it anymore in the night sky, or in the day sky. Sometimes you can see the moon during the day too. So that second phase or second half of the cycle is called waning, and you have the third quarter where it goes from full until half again, and then from half until the new moon, and that completes one cycle. And so we can start off by talking about just the two halves of the cycle, the waxing moon and the waning moon. So the waxing moon is when it's growing, essentially, when we can, every night we're seeing a little bit more of the moon's face. Less and less of the shadow of the earth is covering the moon. So more and more light begins to reflect off of the face of the moon every night during the waxing phase. So during that waxing phase of the moon, usually people will perform rituals that are productive, or trying to manifest something. It's not just rituals, actually. Anything that you want to begin or you want to grow, it's good to work on that during the waxing phase of the moon. During the waning phase of the moon, when the moon is becoming darker and darker every day, that's a good time to work on introspective types of things, where you are contemplating things, you are doing shadow work, where you are delving into your own psyche and exploring some of the darker aspects of your psyche, you could say, or things that have been suppressed, and exploring that, doing that sort of inner work. That's excellent for the waning moon. Also, ending projects, it's great to do during the waning phase of the moon, during that roughly 2 weeks where it's from the full until it's new. So that's just the basic interpretation of the waxing and the waning phases of the moon, those two halves of that cycle. Let me just take a look at some of these comments here. I see Phoebe said, yes, I find this virtue definition interesting, and I was wondering and talking to AI about it being translated as essence in some sense, because it seems that the I Ching is 64 essences. But it seems that in Chinese philosophy, the alchemical progression doesn't actually lead toward this essence, so I can't wrap my head around it. Okay, well, yeah, well, we weren't specifically talking about the I Ching, although that is another Taoist text that is very important. But the text that we were doing the divination from And reading from the chapter this evening was the Tao Te Ching, which is the Tao, the Te, and then Ching just basically means like a text. And so the I Ching is a different text, though, and the I Ching has 64 major hexagrams. They're referred to as. You could think of them as chapters, like in the Tao Te Ching, but really they're associated with a particular hexagram, which is a stack of 6 lines that are either broken or unbroken. And you have 64 different combinations that you can make with a stack of 6 lines. It's a binary type system. And in the Tao Te Ching that we were reading from tonight, that has 81 chapters in it. So there are 81 different chapters of the Tao Te Ching. And we read, what was it, 59 or something? I can't remember the number of the chapter that we read tonight, but yeah, there are 81 in that, which is interesting because 64 is the square of 8, and 81 is the square of 9. So that's, I don't know, I find it interesting. You could put all of the 64 hexagrams on a chessboard, 1 per square. You could put 1 chapter of the Tao Te Ching each on 1 square of a shogi board, which is Japanese chess, or on a magic square of the moon. Whereas the I Ching, you could put the 64 hexagrams, 1 each on a square of the magic square of Mercury. So if you were to use that as a guide, then the I Ching is more mercurial and the Tao Te Ching is more lunar. So it's kind of fitting, perhaps, that I read from the Tao Te Ching in a video about the lunar phases. I don't know if that helps from what you were contemplating or not, but yeah, it's just an interesting kind of factoid. To me, it's very significant, but that maybe is a topic for another video. So we discussed the moon phases and what each phase of the moon is called. The 4 quarters of the moon phases, which go from the new moon to the first quarter, second quarter, which leads us to the full moon. Then we go from the full moon to the 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, and back to the new moon. So the 1st and 2nd quarter are waxing, which are good for starting things, growing things, manifestation. The 3rd and 4th quarter waxing phases of the moon are good for introspection, shadow work, ending things, cutting ties, even that sort of thing, that sort of work, whether it's esoteric work or actual just practical life things. What you can do is the meaning of that can be enhanced. You can give whatever work you're doing a bit of a boost in those particular directions by tying the timing of your work to that natural lunar cycle. Now, objectively, the lunar cycle does have an impact on the Earth, and particularly large bodies of water, especially the oceans, as we see the movement of the moon does impact the tides. And it's often mentioned that the human body is a huge percentage of it is water, And so people say, well, of course the moon has an impact on us individually as it goes through its cycle. Now, it's not specifically the amount of light that's coming from the moon that causes this. It's actually how close the moon gets to the Earth and the gravity that it exerts on the Earth in its elliptical orbit, because it's not a perfectly circular orbit. It's elliptical, and so as it's closer to the Earth, it causes these tides, and it gets closer and further away from the Earth. It has more and less gravitational impact. But it has been noted that the amount of light coming from the moon does impact us, at least psychologically. So that is a very real phenomenon. And you'll hear about things like people get a little wilder, or there is more crime that happens around around a full moon. Now, there could be a practical reason for this, maybe because there's more light at night where people can go about doing their crazy business or their lunacy, perhaps. When there's more light out, they might feel more able to operate in the night with that natural illumination. But regardless, it is something that we do see statistically: more criminal activity, more erratic behavior during a full moon for some reason. So that is something that we can tap into. We can tap into that extra kind of chaotic energy, or that disruptive or even subversive energy during a full moon. Now, the other end of the spectrum, the opposite side of the lunar cycle, and I'm talking about the lunar cycle we've been mentioning, where how much light we can see from the moon. During a new moon, the Earth is completely blocking the moon from the light of the sun. Not technically 100%. If you're very, very observant, or if you have equipment, you can still see the moon, but generally it's pretty much completely dark, and it's reflecting the minimal amount of light from the sun because the shadow of the Earth is covering it. So essentially you have a lineup of the sun on one side of the Earth and the moon on the other side, and then at night we don't see the moon because the Earth's shadow is covering it completely. Now, at this point, you have the best view into the rest of the cosmos. You have the lowest amount of light pollution. And now it's not pollution in the sense that it's toxic, but in the sense of, for example, if you are in a big city, there is a lot of light pollution from street lights, from buildings, from billboards and signs, from car headlights, that sort of thing. You have a lot of ambient light around you just from artificial sources such as streetlights and buildings and signs and things like that, and it impacts our ability to observe the stars in the sky at night, and that is referred to as light pollution. Now, the sun during the day is the biggest source of light pollution, because when the sun's out, we can't see any of the stars. We can sometimes see the moon when the sun is above the horizon, but we don't see any stars. Now, Venus, the planet Venus, happens to be one of the planets that is visible when all of the other stars, or all of the other celestial objects, I should say, other than the sun and the moon, are not visible. But once the sun rises above the horizon, then it washes out anything else other than the moon. Sometimes you can still see the moon sometimes, but Venus tends to be that last celestial object that we can see other than the sun and the moon, just before the sun rises, and that's why it's referred to as the morning star. It's the same thing at night. When the sun sets, the first celestial object other than the moon that we will be able to observe is usually the planet Venus, and that's in that circumstance is referred to as the evening star. So Venus is usually the third brightest object, or the third brightest celestial object other than the sun and the moon. But that aside, that's kind of a diversion from the topic of tonight. Oh, I see. Phoebe said the absence of light pollution and stargazing, when in the presence of it, is indeed quite illuminating and awe-inspiring. I highly recommend that anyone who hasn't experienced that go and do it. Yeah, so if you can get somewhere where you have very little light pollution, and especially if you can get there on a new moon, when the moon is not illuminated, where it's not really visible in the night sky, that is ideal for stargazing. You can see the furthest out into the cosmos during that time, and I feel that that is deeply symbolic of awareness of the more subtle levels of consciousness that we have available to us in our psyche, even. And it's the closest we can get to what I like to refer to as the void, which is perhaps the closest we can get to base reality, which is the substrate consciousness, you could say, that all experience arises from, and which dissolves back into. So the new moon is very important in my practice, as it is the darkest point in the lunar cycle, and the point at which we can see the deepest into ourselves, at least symbolically, and that goes a long way. That there is no light that's hitting us other than in the nighttime, that other than that from the stars, the distant stars, and also from the planets as well. So you can still see planets within our solar system, but it's nothing compared to the light of the sun or the moon. So you eliminate the sun and the moon from the light that's hitting us, and we get that the more subtle sources of illumination available to us during the new moon. So it's very special. And actually, in the Novus Ordo Luciferi, I always recommend that if anybody wanted to do their self-initiation rite, that ideally they would be doing it during a new moon, during the night of a new moon. That is the ideal timing for that. Now, if you wanted to know a bit more about the Novus Ordo Luciferi, that is the vehicle through which I teach a system of occultism referred to as Luciferian Alchemy. And this is a system that I have developed and refined over the course of about 30 years of being a serious practicing occultist. And if you want to find out more information about that, there's a link in the description of this video and that'll take you to the Patreon as well. There's a link directly to the homepage of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. And after this live stream, in about 15 minutes roughly from now, we're going to have a private members meeting for members of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. And if you wanted to join that, you can actually join the order through the Patreon link in the description of this video. It's only $5 a month, and you get access to all of the teachings. It's not gate kept in terms of what degree. You can jump right in. You can do it in a progression, a logical progression that is available to you, but if you don't want to go through that logical progression, you can jump in and explore as you will. And there's already a corpus of teachings and practices in written form, as well as there are a bunch of video lessons that were recorded over since the order was founded. Some of the private meetings that we do, like we're going to have tonight, some of those are formal lessons in topics such as lucid dreaming, astral projection, tarot, self-hypnosis, poison path pranayama, which is a very unique form of esoteric breath work. All sorts of different topics, including even community development, local community development, and things like that. And we have at this point recorded about 50 hours worth of lessons. We were going to do a formal lesson in money magic tonight, which we've already done several sessions in that, although we had to postpone it, which might be tomorrow or within the next few days, but I'll keep you notified. Tonight we're just doing a casual hangout that won't be recorded, but you can ask questions, talk about whatever you feel like, and just get to know one another in the membership, share fellowship and community and that sort of thing. If you are interested in that, you can join the Patreon at the $5 per month tier or above, and that will unlock the most recent post on the Patreon, which will have a link to tonight's meeting. So yeah, if you want to jump in on that, and then you get access to all of those courses. I'm not charging $90 for a 6-hour course on lucid dreaming and astral projection, like you might find out there. It's just $5. It's included in membership. $5 gets you access to that 6-hour course. We also have a very in-depth tarot course, which doesn't just get into divination, but also ritual magic, working with tarot magic, and all sorts of other things, dream incubation with tarot, that sort of thing. And it's all included in membership. Also, membership in the Novus Ordo Luciferi actually gets you access to the Luciferian Research Society website as well, which is normally about $1 a month. But if you're a Novus Ordo Luciferi member or NOL member, then you get access to the Luciferian Research Society website as well as a perk. Yeah, I mean, I could go on about the perks, but let's see what we have. Beyond Zebra said, I may not be able to make the NOL meeting tonight. I'm glad the lesson was rescheduled because I wanted to be there for the live. Yeah, that's okay. No problem. And even if you do happen to miss a formal lesson as a member, you will get access to the recording after the fact as well. Let's see here. All right, so the lunar phases, the main things to think about in the lunar phases are the new moon, and how that is one of the most potent points in the lunar cycle for introspection, for seeking awareness of the most subtle sources of illumination available. And the full moon is the peak of lunar energy, where we can access that huge amount of lunar energy, basically. So lunar energy, you can refer to it as, I like to think of the moon as the gateway to the astral. It is about how do I word this? Creativity, inspiration, that sort of thing. It's the gateway to the astral, and it can be a very chaotic energy, but it's also very powerful. And so during the full moon, you get the full blast of that available to you. And if you know how to harness that, you can do some very powerful magic on the full moon as well. Now, in between that, you have the waxing phase, the first and second quarter. As I said, it's perfect for starting things, growing things, manifesting things. Whereas the third and fourth quarter are the waning phases of the moon, and that's great for introspection. It's great for ending things, cutting ties, destructive magic, however you interpret that, and shadow work as well. And those are the most important points to keep in mind when you are looking at trying to time any work that you do to the lunar phases. Now, actually, if you want to get into even further detail or more granular, you might want to look into the mansions of the moon. And these go into much more granular depth and beyond just the quarters and the new and full moon aspects. It gets quite in depth if you want to take it to that level. I find for most work, you don't really need to go beyond just looking at whether it's the new moon, the full moon, first, second, third, or fourth quarter. I find that sufficient, but you can get into quite in depth about that if you look into the mansions of the moon, is what it's referred to as. Now, if you want to track the lunar cycles, the modern standard Gregorian calendar that we all use is not the best for that. It doesn't track the lunar cycles at all. The months, the 12 months of a solar year, don't track to the lunar cycles at all. They're kind of arbitrary, or they're more based on the seasons. But if you wanted to look at a lunar calendar that is explicitly occult, you can look at the new Luciferian era calendar, which I've developed. And currently we are in year 12 of the new Luciferian era. But what the new Luciferian era calendar tracks are the daily cycles, the 24-hour Earth cycle, where, as science just defines it, one complete rotation of the Earth on its axis. It tracks that. The Earth cycle. It tracks the lunar cycles, and we refer to those not as months but as lunations. and it tracks a solar cycle. One full solar year is one full solar cycle. That is the Earth making one full trip around the sun, which takes a full year, and that encompasses the 4 seasons and the equinoxes, the solstices, and the cross quarter festivals, etc. So the new Luciferian era format is the year, the solar year, the current lunation or lunar cycle within that solar year, and then the current number of days into the current lunar cycle. So you have 3 numbers in that sequence: the year, the lunation, and the day. And let me just check the new Luciferian era calendar and let you know what today is. So today being July 20th of 2025 in the Gregorian calendar, it is currently year 12, lunation 7, day 25. So that immediately you know that we are in the 4th quarter waning of the moon just by looking at how many days into the lunation 7 we are. 25 days. And as I said, most lunations are 29 days. Now we start counting at 0 for each of these. So this is a little mini lesson in the new Luciferian era calendar. So year 12, lunation 7, day 25, and I typically would just say 12/7/25 NLE, or New Luciferian Era. Now, if we look ahead to this upcoming Thursday, which is July 24th, 2025, in the Gregorian calendar, that is year 12, lunation 8, day 0. That is the next new moon. And so then we increment the lunation day or lunation number, and the day resets back to 0, and we start counting from there. So then the 25th will be 12/8/1, the 26th will be 12/8/2, and etc. And so we can just easily look at that, and we can tell roughly what part of the lunar cycle we're in. So like I said, when I looked at that and I saw that today is 12/7/25, instantly I know that we are in the 4th quarter waning of the lunar cycle. And then on the 24th of July, we will be it will be 12/8/0 NLE. And so I know that day is a new moon. So that's the value of the new Luciferian era calendar, or one value of it is we can keep track of those cycles. And actually, as a Novus Ordo Luciferi member, you will get access to the Google Calendar, which has all the new Luciferian era dates in the proper format for mapped out to the Gregorian calendar. And as a member, you get access to that, so you don't have to do all the calculations yourself. But there is information if you want to search New Luciferian Era. You can look up the rules for how that's calculated out and calculate it out yourself. But if you don't want to do those calculations, you can join the order for $5 a month via the Patreon in the link below, and you'll get access to that calendar as well. I see Matt Priestess said, had the goat emoji and says, great session, Jeremy. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. And on that note, I will wrap up this public live stream tonight. I try and do these as often as I can, with as much as I can without burning myself out. I think we did about 14 of them in the past month, roughly. And I'm going to wrap this up because it's 11:11, and I'm going to start the private NOL meeting. So if you wanted to jump in on that, you can join the Patreon. It'll unlock the most recent post, which has the link to the meeting in it for tonight. And until next time, everyone, stay lucid.